Without herbicides, organic farmers manage weeds using three main strategies. 1. Preventing new weeds from arriving. 2. Keeping weeds from emerging. And 3. Killing the weeds that do emerge. While I separate these aspects of weed management into three distinct categories for training purposes, you'll see that they are all part of a comprehensive weed management system. So let's talk about some prevention here. USDA organic regulations specify in sections 205, 206A that organic farmers must use management strategies to prevent weeds. Prevention is done through practices like cleaning off the machines between fields so as not to spread weeds between those fields. Also, scouting those fields to catch new, small weed populations before they spread, and by preventing weeds from going to seed. To be successful with these weed management strategies, it is crucial to be able to identify top common weeds in the regions in which you plan to inspect. For example, in this field, I see some giant ragweed, some velvet leaf, some foxtail, and a bunch of grass. Once you've identified your top weeds, you can learn their life cycles. Like, when do they germinate? When do they set seed? And how do they grow? This is the type of knowledge that becomes a tool. Here's what I mean. Foxtail is a weed issue in this field. We know that foxtail tends to germinate in early summer as the soil warms up, and you can see that reflected in this soybean field. The field on the right was planted on June 2nd, at the same time that the foxtail was germinating, and so the foxtail was able to outcompete the crop. The result is almost a total loss of the crop. However, on the left, the farmer used their knowledge to outcompete foxtail and decided to delay planting by 3 weeks. That allowed the largest flush of foxtail to germinate in early June and then be killed with tillage that prepared the seedbed. This meant that when the crop was ready to go, it was growing in a condition where it didn't have to compete with the foxtail. The difference caused by delaying planting by 3 weeks is dramatic. This is just one example of many where knowing the characteristics of the most common weeds allows effective management strategies beyond just mechanical cultivation. The farmer is using knowledge of their weeds to prevent weeds from emerging. Hello, NOP 205-206A. Let's note here that even though our soybean crop on the left looks great, there are some foxtail growing, but so few that I had to circle for you just to see them. You can see that the presence of some weeds did not prevent the growing of a wonderful crop. In order to successfully use practices that prevent weeds from emerging, it's helpful to be able to identify the common weeds in your region and know their life cycles. In the Midwest, those weeds tend to be giant ragweed, pigweed, Palmer amaranth, water hemp, and velvet leaf. In the high plains and Rocky Mountains where I farm, the top weeds for organic field crops are often Canada thistle, bindweed, wild oats, kochia. Why do I have all these? Cheatgrass and wild buckwheat. Well, I'm sure you are itching to get out and know those champion weeds in your region. You'll have to do that on your own, but use the Dig Deeper section in this lesson to get you started. Judicious use of tillage is another great way to keep weeds from emerging. When you know your weed's life cycle and growth habits, you can plan both the type and the timing of your tillage to target the weeds at their weakest point in the life cycle, and incorporate tillage into your broader crop rotation. This type of weed control, where we're using knowledge to design an effective weed control strategy rather than just mechanical tools, is commonly called ecological weed management, and it can make all the difference. Let me give you an example to illustrate. Canada thistle, the bane of many Western farmers, mine included, existence. Canada thistle is a tough perennial weed that spreads through its roots. Those roots hold a lot of energy, so even if we disturb them through tillage once, they'll grow right back. A single pass with a machine is not going to be a magic bullet. Instead, we need to take a broad spectrum approach. The plant's energy reserves are low in the spring, when the thistle has between 4 and 7 leaves. This is the weak point where tillage will do the most damage. To really deplete the energy reserves, a fallow period of 2 to 4 weeks is helpful, so that 1 to 2 tillage passes can be made to really weaken those roots. That information gives a timing to our tillage. But what type of tillage is best? Canada thistle has spreading roots, so the tillage tool must have overlapping sweeps that will disturb all of the roots in a cultivation swath. Now, we know the type of tillage. The 2 passes will weaken the roots, but not prevent the thistle from regrowing. So what crop could come next in our rotation that will allow continued control? This is how crop rotation is a critical part of weed management. We've got a few options. A farmer could plant a widely spaced field crop like corn or soybeans that will allow for effective mechanical control throughout the season, whereas a densely planted grain like oats would not allow for much mechanical weed control. A farmer could plant a vigorous and dense forage crop like sorghum Sudan grass. This would compete well with regrowing Canada thistle, and it could be either grazed or mowed several times throughout the season, which would further deplete the energy of any thistles regrowing. A perennial forage crop like alfalfa could play a similar role, with several cuttings throughout the year. Now you see how we took the knowledge of a weed, chose the timing and the type of tillage accordingly, and fit that tillage into a crop rotation that would target the life cycle of the Canada thistle? I'm telling you, knowledge is power, baby! Take a look at the Dig Deeper section to learn a little bit more about ecological weed management. Preventing new weeds from arriving and keeping weeds from emerging are crucial parts of organic weed management. But some weeds still emerge and compete with your crop, and they are managed with direct control. Direct weed control is done with all manner of weeding machines. Most commonly, these are types of cultivators that kill weeds. Here's a row crop cultivator used for weeding between crop rows. See how there is space here for the crop row to pass through? And here's a tine weeder for weeding within crop rows. See how the tines cover the full width? The most important part of direct control of weeds is the timing of that cultivation pass. It's most effective when the weeds are small. Non-cultivation machines for weed control include the Weed Zapper that electrocutes the weeds that are standing above the crop. Also, we can use a propane flame weeder to burn the weeds. Mowing is a super helpful means of getting all of the weeds consistently chopped down and is part of a larger prevention strategy. While mechanical tools can be effective, a farmer who buys a fancy cultivator and expects that that alone will solve all their weed problems is likely not going to be very successful. Weeding tools need to be part of a bigger system that involves preventing new weeds from emerging, keeping weeds from germinating, and killing those weeds that do emerge. There is a heck of a lot of information out there on mechanical weed control, and you can learn more about it in the Dig Deeper section. Weed management on organic field crop farms is a top concern for newer organic producers. Recognizing that clean fields in organic are often just not possible will help them focus on realistic strategies that achieve that good enough weed control.